Hi, everyone. As many of you know, my name is Emi. I was really looking forward to being there today and seeing you all again. But unfortunately, just due to unforeseen circumstances, I couldn't make it. Um, so I'd like to just share virtually some of my thoughts about today's baccalaureate service. The year I graduated from high school was 2011, 13 years ago. Long before the pandemic and live streamed Sunday service, in the days when most people had dumb phones and texting was done with 10 buttons. The iPhone 4S was just released, Facebook was the top social media platform, and Instagram was launched just a few months prior. The final Harry Potter movie hit theaters, and the world was devastated by the 2011 Japan earthquake and nuclear disaster. Party rock anthem was all over the radio, and it was the year of Bruno Mars, as evidenced by his multiple number one hits and our class selecting one of his songs for graduation. Troy Hashimoto, a former junior YBA member like myself, was working in the state legislature and spoke at my baccalaureate service. Now, I don't remember specifically what he talked about, just like I don't expect any of you to remember any of this 13 years later. But what I do remember is that feeling of awe at hearing the words of someone who had grown up in the temple just like me and was doing great things with his life. I carried that feeling with me and couldn't wait to be a grown up like him. 13 years is a long time, and back when I was in high school, 13 years felt like an eternity. But in hindsight, it's flown by in the blink of an eye. As a college instructor and 13-year-long college student myself, I've learned quite a few life lessons along the way. I'm not sure if I'm qualified as a grown-up yet, but Auntie Sharon asked me to speak at today's service regardless, so I'll share those lessons, even if they're still a work in progress. All right, number one, don't be afraid to take risks. Something that I've noticed in my students' attitudes is that the word uncomfortable has become a bit of a bad word. It's a label used to criticize and find fault in others. Things that are uncomfortable are seen as negative and thus should be avoided. But this belief ignores the Buddhist duality of nature, that things can be both positive and negative simultaneously. Uncomfortable is not inherently good nor bad, then, neither good nor evil. It simply exists. Doing things that are uncomfortable for you can be an unpleasant experience, but it can also lead to growth. In medicine, discomfort can be painful, but it can also be a clue to the proper treatment. From the pain, suffering, challenge, and risks arises growth, freedom, learning, and empowerment. The lotus grows from the mud, or as they say, no pain, no gain. Two, working hard does not always equal to success. This one can come as a bit of a culture shock, as often in school environments, you might be used to being graded on effort or how hard you've tried. Unfortunately, in college and life beyond, it doesn't always work out this way. Of course, you can't win a race if you haven't even entered to begin with. You must put in the effort and try your best to even start with. But there are some things that you will ultimately fail at least the first time. Don't give up. What's more important than the initial effort you've put in is the continued effort you show towards improvement. You might not be great or succeed at everything the first time. In fact, you might fail a lot. But each of those failures are learning opportunities that will lead you to closer to success each time. It's important to remember that although you might fail at some things, you are not a failure. Let go of your ego attachment, and you'll find it's a lot easier to try again until you succeed. Three, take time to find your passion before committing. This one might be a bit controversial with your parents and counselors, but if you're on the fence about your career path and what you want to do with your life, I think it's better to explore your options now before you've invested more time and end up changing your mind anyway. When I was a freshman in college, I had to go to peer advising. I actually entered college with extra credits, thanks to dual enrollment and Running Start. But because I entered as a pre-education major, my advisors questioned why I was taking classes like women's studies, psychology, and astronomy. You're wasting your time, they said, and you're not going to graduate on time at this rate. It was the first semester of college. I took these classes at the recommendation of an older friend, and I'll pass along that advice. Taking astronomy was a perspective shifting class for me, and I highly recommend if you can squeeze it into your schedule at some point. I ended up switching my major at the end of my first year and still graduated in 3 years anyway. Had I taken all pre education courses for a full year, I would have graduated a year late because I hadn't found my passion yet. So stay on track and take courses that will fulfill graduation requirements. But also use your first year to take those courses that are interesting to you before you commit to a major for the rest of your college career. The same goes for any trade or occupation or career path that you might be considering. Test the waters first. 4. Imposter syndrome is real and everyone is also struggling. Imposter syndrome is the feeling like everyone belongs and you're an imposter. It's easy to feel that way in college. You've gone from doing well and perhaps being the top of your class in high school to now being surrounded by others who are also the top of their class at their school. You're no longer the smartest person in the room, and that can be a difficult identity shift. But don't forget that you belong there. You got there just like everyone else, and someone saw that you were qualified for the position. It may look like everyone knows what they're doing, but they're probably just as lost as you are. When I started my master's program, I thought that my classmates were all so smart and that I had nothing to contribute. It turns out that we were all thinking the same thing. It wasn't until we opened up to one another that we realized that we were all struggling and feeling the same way. You are not alone. Which brings me to number 5. You are your own worst critic. It took me going to therapy until I was called out for being a self-bully. I didn't even realize that that was possible. But my counselor told me that over our sessions, they've gotten to know me as a person and saw me as something like a friend. And if they heard someone say bad things about their friend, they would be mad. Don't talk bad about my friend. She's a good person. So, why would you let yourself say bad things about yourself when you wouldn't let someone say that about a friend? It made me realize that I need to be more aware in my inner monologue and be kinder to myself. Constantly telling myself that I was a failure and calling myself names was letting me be a bully to me. 6, your feelings are valid. Irrational emotions don't make logical sense. Maybe you're disproportionately upset about a bad grade, your dog dying, or the time that you spilt milk on your favorite shirt. You should not apologize for the way that you're feeling. They're your feelings, so no one else can tell you if they're right or wrong, an overreaction or an underreaction. What's important is how you process those feelings. Recognize what you're feeling, even if it doesn't make logical sense at first, to yourself or to others. Then figure out the root cause or trigger of those emotions, the underlying need or motivation behind your emotions, and work through them. But the feelings are there for a reason, and don't let anyone tell you that they're not valid. 7, protect your work-life balance. This is another potentially controversial one. I'm not saying to slack off and go to the beach every day as much as we might all want to, but it's important to maintain distance from school and or work. You're actually more productive when you're well rested and have had time to creatively and mentally take a break. Consider keeping your email off your phone so that you're not tempted to constantly check it. But do, of course, check it during school or work as needed. Take a true weekend off from studying and work. Protect your free time so that you can be more productive during working hours. You can't pour from an empty cup. 8. Find your people. I had grand expectations that I was going to make a whole bunch of new, amazing friends in college and that it would be just like the movies. I tried attending freshman mixers, but it ended up being more of the same people, especially because I went to UH Manoa along with around 1/3 of my high school class. I found it hard to make actual friends in class because I talk and hang out with people in class, but then we go our separate ways. It never blossomed into true friendship, and I felt like there was something wrong with me. But in all of these expectations for what I thought college would be like, I didn't realize the lifelong friendships I was making. My friend group shifted from high school, but these are some of my longest adult friendships now. I was also fortunate to have the Buddhist Studies Center nearby, and I joined their youth group and helped out with planning Yes Camp. These people are still my friends 13 years later, surviving a move to the mainland and various stages of life. You'll find your people when you stop trying so hard to fit them to your expectations and see them as they are. 9, a bit of practical advice. Don't room with your best friend if you want to keep being friends. I saw many friendships ruined after rooming together freshman year. If your roommate sucks, as they often do, you can complain about them to your best friend. But if your roommate is your best friend, well, I'll be honest. I wasn't a great roommate when I was young. I didn't know what my habits were. I didn't know what I needed in a good roommate. Years later, after we graduated, I was able to live with my best friends, and it was one of the best times of my life. But we were older then and more experienced with living on our own. We knew what we wanted, we knew what we needed from others, and could communicate. Don't ruin your friendships by living together when you're still learning how to adult. Leading to number 10, friendship breakups are sometimes inevitable and should be mourned. Sometimes you grow apart, sometimes something hurtful happens, sometimes you just don't know why the friendship has ended. We don't often talk about losing friends like we do with romantic breakups, yet they're just as, if not even more, heartbreaking. I want to be optimistic and say that you'll keep all of your friends forever, but that's just not realistic. Especially as you move from high school to adulthood, you might drift apart from your friends since you don't see them every day. You can try to keep in touch and you'll maintain those friendships that are truly important, but it will take work. You'll eventually grow apart from some friends or even harshly break up. I hope you process and mourn those friendships because as much as breaking up hurts, it shows how much you cared about them to begin with. 11, be assertive, but also do know that sometimes it does hurt to ask. What do I mean by this? Well, there's a prevailing saying that it doesn't hurt to ask, but it's a relatively self-serving phrase if you ask me. There are causes and conditions, consequences to everything. It might not hurt you to ask for an exception, for someone to bend the rules or to take pity on you, but it might hurt someone else. Someone else might miss an opportunity because you push for it. Someone else might lose their job for bending the rules. Or sometimes it's making the other person be the bad guy, the person who has to say no and feel guilty about ruining your opportunity. Now, there are certainly times when you should speak up for yourself and do ask questions if you have them. But please be prepared to accept the answer gracefully, even if the answer is no. You'll probably find that more opportunities come your way when you are polite and reasonable than if you take any goodwill with being overly pushy. 12. Explore, travel, date while you have the chance. I know that when you're young, it feels like you never have enough time, money, or resources. It can be easy to say, oh, I'll travel when I have a job, or I'll move somewhere else in a few years. But if you keep saying that, then that time will never come. There will always be obligations, competing opportunities, or unfortunate circumstances that arise. Take the time when you're relatively free and young and have the time to explore. Travel the world as much as you can. Meet as many new people as possible. P.S. Online dating doesn't have to be scary. That's how I met my husband. Test out new hobbies, personalities, identities, experiences. The world is your oyster. My mom always told me to choose where you live after graduation carefully because once you start putting down roots, it's so much harder to move after that. I established roots in Phoenix, Arizona for grad school, and it took us 7 years and a lot of commitment to finally move back to Hawaii, which we did so last year. But we did that by choice after having experienced living in other places, and we're now so happy to be back home. And finally, number 13, come home when you need to, including the Hongwanji. Home can be anywhere. It might be where your parents live, where your friends are, or where you eventually set down your roots. I called Arizona my home for years, but it was still exhausting. The culture is different, the people are different, and I didn't fit in like how I do at home. But I found pockets of home where I could. After a lot of trial and error, my husband and I found restaurants nearby that had food similar to Hawaii. I cooked more, especially with my grandma's recipes. And I once almost cried when visiting the Arizona Buddhist temple. Why? Well, it's very, very clearly Arizona-esque with its cacti and dirt gravel everywhere. Nothing about the scenery is like beautiful, luscious Makawao. Yet, the Shinran statue in the front, the temple bell hanging on the building, the Amida statue when you walk in, were all reminiscent of home. It was a dose of familiarity in the middle of the desert and helped me immensely with my homesickness. I encourage you to do the same and find your own pockets of home wherever you are. So, those were my 13 life lessons learned over the past 13 years. Where will you be in the next 13 years? How will the world have changed? Will you be a doctor finishing your residency? Will you start your own business, have a family, travel the world? Will AI have taken over society? A lot will change in 13 years, but I hope that maybe, wherever you are, whatever the world is like, you'll be invited back here to Makawao to speak at Tyrus's class of 2037 baccalaureate service. Congratulations to the class of 2024, Kaylee, James, and Tyrus. I can't wait to see where you'll be in the next 13 years and beyond.